Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Scorpio and Scorpio rising. So double the pleasure. I actually knew someone who had sun, moon, and rising all in Scorpio. So these things do happen. And if the sun and the rising sign are within a certain degree span of, I don't know if like 10 degrees is the rule or not, but it would be considered in conjunction, which basically means that the two planets or 2 points in question are enhanced with that connection in that sign. Usually a conjunction will occur when 2 points are in the same sign, but not always. And so if we look at aspects as the energy that is created when two planets or points have some kind of connection to one another, then we can see that the conjunction strengthens it, enhances it. And you could even say exacerbates if it's kind of a challenging thing. Like, for instance, if Mars and Pluto form a conjunction, that could exacerbate things because both of these planets have their own intensity and aggression. So when they make contact like that by being in the same sign or in relatively close proximity, then it makes it even stronger, but in a potentially challenging way. In this case, it would really cement the personality or the appearance in some cases, the mannerisms, and the things that are, your main aspirations in this lifetime that the sun represents. They will be consistent with how you present yourself in some way. So, an example that I could give is, let's say you are a Scorpio person and you feel that you are a psychic, that you can go into some kind of altered state, a trance, whatever, and you can maybe like a medium, that kind of thing. Well, you may give off these kind of witchy vibes. That's the eighth house that Scorpio rules is very much about magic and shamanism in terms of like the spiritual practices. It's more open ended, but it can be magical practices, paganism, and that kind of thing. And this could be represented with the rising sign. The way the person dresses can certainly come out, but then the sun sign just enhances that. And maybe this is how you really appear. But I do want to say that even if your sun and rising sign are not in conjunction, I still think that you will be consistent in these areas of life. And so, in a way, you could say it doesn't make much of a difference when they're in the same sign, whether or not they officially form a conjunction. I guess I just wanted to let people know that that was the aspect that was most likely to occur, um, if there was going to be one between this sun and rising sign. And by the way, when there's consistency like this, it's like, what you see is what you get. And the funny thing about Scorpio is that it tends to be very hidden. So you don't know what you're seeing and you don't know what you're getting. Because Scorpio may hide these kinds of things. Scorpios are very mysterious, or if you want to look at it in a more challenging way, a very secretive sign. And the reason that you're like this is because you are looking to maintain power or obtain power in your life. Pluto, one of your rulers, is really about this, and Mars is your other ruler, and it can be this warrior energy. And the warrior doesn't want to be caught when its defenses are down. So you will see Scorpio people, and the rising sign could really show the walls that are up, that have like a very strong force field, but a very strong defensive shield around you. And this can be helpful if you have had a background in trauma, which having the sun and the rising sign in Scorpio pretty much guarantees it. I mean, when I say trauma, most of us, probably all of us, have had at least one traumatic event in our life. One event where there was some kind of crisis. It doesn't have to be outright abuse, but it certainly could be. There's lots of forms of abuse and mistreatment, but also emergency situations and things like that, life and death situations. And if not with that occurred to you personally, maybe you saw a parent die, or a parent died, or somebody that you really cared about in your life died when you were young, when you couldn't really process it. So it doesn't have to be something that happened to you specifically, but a crisis in your life nonetheless. And so all signs can have that, but Scorpio is a water sign, and it's also the area of life that one of the themes of the eighth house being transformation can be death, because death is the ultimate form of transformation. And the death card in the tarot is Scorpio. What are most people most afraid of? Death, ultimately. So the shadow elements of life, Scorpio is the expert in excavating these kinds of things. But when it comes to you, you may wish to kind of maintain control or power over this, because you have, possibly experienced things out of your control. So that may motivate you to try to gain control. And as a result, that can lead to a person who keeps their private life very private. You can be very secretive about your life in general. Maybe you have people that you trust in your inner circle, and that could be a big thing too, where you have this very pronounced inner circle, and then there's like a hierarchy. Certain people are out of the loop, because you don't share much with them. And I mean, I'm not saying that is totally unusual for anybody, but there are some people, especially now with social media, that they just tell all their business and they don't have a filter. So you're not one of those people, typically. I mean, you personally, there might be some Scorpios who are more open. Maybe they have Gemini rising, but even those kinds of people probably have like more of a facade of being open, but when you get right down to it, they are still, it's like Fort Knox at the end of the day. Okay, so in terms of appearance, you may be the kind of person. I said this before with another video. I was thinking of Morticia Adams. I'm kind of joking. I'm saying for women, gothic look, but because the sun sign is also in Scorpio, this may be something that really is like that, because there are some people nowadays because our world is such that we really, and it's a good thing, really, when you think about it, we don't have the same kind of fashion trends as controlled us as a society in the past. I start to see this go away in the 90s, and it's become even more pronounced today. Um, so people pretty much dress how they feel like, and um, they wear all kinds of things. They dye their hair all kinds of colors. And some people look like they're in Halloween 365 days a year. That's that's very interesting. And you might be one of those people. You may love Halloween, might be your sacred holiday. Of course, there is a pagan holiday on Halloween called Samhain. I think that's how you pronounce it. Samhain. And so, anyway, you may dress in that, you may favor kind of dark clothing. And if even if you're a blonde, you may dye your hair black, not just dark brown, but jet black. I've seen people who walk around like this, wearing black lipstick, dark eyeliner, maybe fishnet stockings. But in any case, there is something sultry about you. What's that phrase for a woman? I was. It reminded me of that line from Rick James, Super Freak, the girl you don't take home to mother. That was a phrase. And it was kind of like this woman who, it's like Black Moon Lilith, who doesn't necessarily look like the girl next door, doesn't look wholesome, if you will, but isn't trying to look wholesome, is trying to look like she's trouble, or um she's got some secrets that she's keeping. And this could be a theme in your life. I mean, also look at your moon sign, because that could be very interesting and also your other, like, inner planets, because let's say you have some Libra energy, which certainly this combination could have. I mean, a sun in Scorpio specifically. There might be this tug of war within yourself about what kind of person. And I'm saying this for men as well, but women are the ones that tend to have this onus, or kind of the burden of having to present themselves in that way, even now, of how you want to present yourself, what you stand for in terms of your sense of self. And in some cases, it's not so much that you want to come across as, dark or anything like that, menacing, but you just have this. What it really, I think it boils down to, is this understanding that life isn't all warm and fuzzy for people. And it's kind of like, some people act like everything is just perfect, or that there is no shadow, and it comes up in the way that they express themselves. Those who know better might choose to dress in a way which kind of symbolizes the fact that there's more to the story than that. But that Libra side may want to be more about the lightness, and so that might be a struggle too. So if you have the moon in Libra, if you have, personal planets in Libra, you may kind of reject that and find yourself at odds with yourself. Um, Talking about that Black Moon Lilith angle, one of the things about Scorpio that's interesting is that it's a feminine sign, being a water sign. And I have observed women who are Scorpios, either the sun sign or the moon sign in particular. And because Scorpio is ruled by Mars and Pluto, and I'm thinking specifically here of Mars, and Mars is the ruler of Aries, which is a masculine sign, a fire sign. It has that masculine vibe to it. There's like a ferocity. Pluto probably too, but I'm thinking specifically of the aggression of Mars. And so sometimes when you're dealing with a Scorpio person, and obviously you're a Scorpio person, but I'm talking about the rest of us, when we're dealing with somebody who's a Scorpio, we can sense that aggression, that ferocity. But I've noticed with females who are Scorpio, and I'm including the moon sign with this, is that they can be very, I don't want to say demure, but they can kind of, sometimes if they're with a male who they deem to be a very strong male, they can kind of defer to that person, and it's almost like they're looking for a man that they can submit to. I know that sounds very backwards, but I have seen that. I mean, I have felt that. I can't say I've seen it, but I've sensed that. And um and obviously I'm talking about heterosexual relationships. I don't think that this would play out. It's a very like male female thing, dynamic kind of thing that I'm talking about. And conversely, if the woman is with a man who she thinks is weak, then it can just like let out all that aggression, because it's almost like being let down by this man who's not protecting, who's not doing his job. So I really feel like there can be this old-fashioned quality in that sense between, with the male-female dynamic. Now, I have observed people who are older. I can't speak for a woman who is like in her early 30s or younger. So I don't know if that still would fly. If you have this combination, I highly suggest that you watch this movie with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. This is a great one for any Scorpio, but definitely for this double uh, version. Because in real life, they were uh, husband and wife for a certain period of time. And this was originally a play. And I believe the movie came out in 1966. So this was during a time when there was social change. It wasn't quite yet the feminist movement, but it was moving in that direction. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the dynamics of men and women in general, and also the Scorpio element, because I believe that even though Elizabeth Taylor was a Pisces, I think her moon was in Scorpio, and Richard Burton was a sun in Scorpio. So the play itself is very scorpionic, and they're kind of like I mean I haven't seen it in a long time, the movie, but they were, going back and forth. Obviously you're basing a movie from a play, it's like all dialogue. So the dialogue is really distilled and it's very powerful. And it was kind of like this just shadow stuff coming out between this couple. And it's just brilliant. So I just recommend that. And that's what I'm kind of talking about, of this idea of the Scorpio woman being disappointed in what she perceives as weakness in the man. So in terms of relationships, that could be a complicated issue for this combination, because if you're a woman and you're attracted to men, in some cases, you may go for a man that is overtly masculine, but he might be very controlling and he might be very, um, or worse. I mean, the control, hopefully it wouldn't be something abusive, but um, the bad boy kind of which is kind of the hyper masculinity, the toxic masculinity, that kind of thing might be strangely appealing to this combination, especially if you come from a background of trauma where you experience this kind of treatment from men even when you're young. So that's something to look out for if you're a woman, where you would perceive a man who is treating you well as weak, or a man who is like very kind and gentle as weak. That's a definitely twisted understanding of what is acceptable behavior, but that's something that can happen. And the interesting thing about that is that Scorpio is such a perceptive sign that you think they would know better, but it doesn't work that way, because Scorpio as a water sign can be run on instinct, and sometimes that can lead you to simply be guided by what triggers you emotionally. And if you're not healed, you're going to be triggered very easily, but it might seem like you're attracted to somebody when actually and when actually it's more like choosing the wrong person because you you find it familiar. And sometimes another thing that can happen too, male or female, is that you attract somebody who's experienced similar things to you, and you feel like you have this bond, but it's a trauma bond. It's really like you've both been through a war of the emotions, and you identify with that. And you talk about what has happened to you, and the other person knows exactly what you've experienced, and there can be some healing in that for sure, because you have somebody who knows what you feel. But unfortunately, you may have the same weaknesses, and even if you have similar strengths, the weaknesses can having similar weaknesses can kind of weigh you both down. So that's something to really watch out for. There can be severe trust issues. It goes without saying that a Scorpio person is like this in general, but then having the rising sign as well. And the rising sign, I feel, is really uh, your conditioned past. So growing up and things like that. You should also look at your first house and your fourth house for more information about your childhood and the kind of things that you might have experienced. Um, but it can lead to a situation where even if you were to meet the man or woman of your dreams, you could be very skeptical that this person was on the up and up, and you might try to test them. And some people are going to kind of shy away from that because they don't want to have to deal with that level of distrust on a constant basis. So it's very important that a person who has this combination understands that they may be overly suspicious. Sometimes it's very hard to really understand this. It's funny because I'm a sun in Sagittarius. I have my sun in the 8th house, which is Scorpio's domain, and I have the moon in conjunction with Pluto, which can be like having the moon in Scorpio. And it has taken me doing these videos for me to understand that about myself, because it's very baked into your personality. So if you're the kind of person, and it can be in more subtle ways, like giving people the third degree about something, almost like acting like you want to know, like, okay, where were you? What were you doing? Needing all these details. Why? Because there's like this suspicion, the suspicion that is second nature for you. And really, I think part of that is a hyper-vigilant tendency to kind of protect yourself from perceived threat. But the problem is that it's the perception is warped. The perception is overstated. Um, it's like you feel as if you need to know. You have to have all this information at hand at all times to protect you from any kind of ambush, emotional ambush. And what keeps popping in my mind is the Page of Swords. If you're familiar with the tarot, you know that the Page of Swords is a card of the spy card, somebody who is very vigilant, watching their back, seeing if somebody is trying to pull one over on them. And the opposite of that is the Page of Cups, somebody who is approaching the world with an open heart, but they're almost like a lamb, going to the slaughter, because it's like they're so innocent and naive. You probably pride yourself on not being naive in life. And the problem with that is that, it's a good thing not to be naive, but you can be so aware of the dark side of life that you overstate it, and so that it becomes, things. There is such a thing as a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so people have to kind of balance being aware of the potential for things to happen and being hyper vigilant. So I do feel that if you can let your guard down, that you can have a relationship with somebody, but you have to have that sense of safety. One thing that might work, actually, or you might want to kind of explore, is on YouTube, they have these practices for calming your nervous system. And sometimes I wonder if, even on the energetic level, not just on the physical level, but if somebody has gone through a lot of trauma, we could say that they emerge with post-traumatic stress disorder. And that can affect them physically, and how they tense up a lot. But even like energetically, if you're tense physically, what do you think the chances are that energetically you're kind of closed off? And even in terms of manifestation, all of the things that people want to bring into their life, to have a better life, that these things are impeded. So, maybe experiment with some of those practices and see if it brings a greater sense of safety to you on the physical level, and that can translate to the energetic level. But I feel like you can be very fiercely, devotedly loving to someone, for sure. In terms of your professions, I think the first thing I would say is that don't underestimate the need for a profession that really that you feel very, very very devoted to, because I consider Scorpio an extreme sign. It's either like you love something or you hate it. Now, I don't agree with hate, and I don't even agree that we should just like be gaga over something. Maybe we have to develop more neutrality, to be honest. And that, promotes detachment, rather than just like going hog wild over something, and then, being, you know, I never want to see this again. That's more bipolar And those are the extremes of emotion. So I could see somebody being more neutral, but I do feel that Scorpio people, you have to love what you do. Some people, like if you were a Taurus, I would say as long as it's not a negative environment, you don't a Taurus person may just enjoy making money, being productive. That's something that might be okay for them, and they don't have to be totally immersed in what they're doing. But somebody like you, I think so. And so in that case, the two professions that jump out at me are the healing arts, which can involve helping other people to transform their lives. And that can include more of a straight thing like psychotherapy, although I think that somebody like you would probably mix some magical practices or shamanism, some kind of a mystical angle to it, or even like hypnotherapy with straight therapy. And, but other healing arts. And the other area is art. And that can be something that is very deeply embedded within you, this passion for creation. I do think Scorpio is a very, um, I was going to say creative. What's that word? Fertile sign. Like a Scorpio woman may find it very easy to conceive. I'm sure there are exceptions, but that's how I feel about it. I think all water signs are like that. But anyway, so that can be something that is healing for you, but also healing for others. Maybe you favor more gothic forms of creative self expression. I love seeing the Day of the Dead um, art around the time of the end of October, early November, because they have all those skulls and things like that. I just think that that is so interesting. And I always make a pilgrimage to the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago to see the Day of the Dead exhibit. And also, they have the Mexican art can depict this kind of, these figures. And it's really beautiful because it is such a taboo subject, death in our culture, and yet it's something that is real for everyone, and not just for our own ultimate fate. And of course, death being a transition, not this permanent state of non existence, but a transition, and physical death, obviously, not your soul, but also in terms of how we experience it with other people. So maybe that's the kind of thing that pulls you in, and it can be healing for other people to learn to make peace with it, for this thing that a lot of people fear. So, again, that is a form of shadow work, isn't it? Okay, well, that's what I have for you, Scorpio, double Scorpio. I hope that this resonated